Welcome to the Urban Herald. We're doing something a bit different today, special investigation.
That's right. We're taking a deep dive into a case that, honestly, even 20 years later, still has this chilling power. An Irish true crime story that really shook the nation.
We are unpacking the Mulhall sisters case. You probably know them by the name the media gave them, the Scissor Sisters.
And it's a name that, while sensational, points to the absolute brutality we'll be discussing. But it's more than just the crime itself.
Definitely. We're also looking at the systemic failures, the context that led up to this incredibly violent act. It's the 20-year mark since the crime in 2005, so it feels like the right time to revisit it.
So let's set the scene. It's Dublin City, March 30th, 2005. We're in Ballybough.
Right near Croke Park, a place most people associate with, GAA matches, big crowds, ordinary city life.
Exactly. That juxtaposition of the ordinary and what was about to be found is just stark. It makes the discovery even more jarring.
So the story really kicks off with the initial find. How did it happen?
Well, it was a passerby, actually alerted by some kids playing nearby. They saw something suspicious floating in the Royal Canal, right there under the Ballback Bridge.
And at first people didn't know what it was.
No, not at all. I mean, the initial thought maybe just a dummy someone had thrown out or, an old shop mannequin caught in the canal debris.
Well,
Sounds mundane almost.
but it wasn't.
Far from it. The first person really on the scene was a fire brigade officer. He used a boat hook, reached into the water and pulled out the object,
Yeah.
and horrifyingly confirmed it was a human leg, still had a sock on it.
Jesus. So immediately this changes everything.
Instantly. This wasn't just some accident or even a typical body disposal. This was deliberate, savage, calculated dismemberment. It screamed extreme violence from the very first moment.
And that description, that level of violence, it stuck with the case, didn't it? I remember the judge's comments later on.
Absolutely. Judicial figures, seasoned professionals, they struggled for words. They eventually called it the most grotesque killing they had ever encountered on the bench. That phrase tells you everything about the impact.
But for the Gardaí, the police, standing there by the canal that day, it was just a massive, immediate mystery. Where do you even start?
Well, the initial response was swift, but darkness was falling. They couldn't do a full search immediately.
So they had to wait.
Had to wait until dawn. Then the specialist Garda divers went in. And this was a huge operation.
How big are we talking?
Over 7 days, meticulously searching 2.5 kilometers of that murky canal water. And they were careful, videoing everything in situ in place before they brought it up. The conditions were tough.
What did they find over those 7 days?
It was grim. They recovered 5 separate bags. Inside, a human torso, 2 legs and 2 arms.
Okay, so most of the body, but not all of it.
Exactly. The victim had been cut into 8 pieces. But crucially, 2 things were missing: the head and the penis.
Right. And those specific missing pieces, that's what really sent the investigation in a very strange direction, didn't it?
It did, because that kind of specific mutilation, removing the head for identity, removing the genitals, it just didn't fit the usual patterns. Even for Dublin's gangland feuds, which were pretty brutal back in March 2005.
Yeah, gangland killings were often quick, violent, but not usually not this kind of methodical dismemberment.
Precisely. So the Gardaí, working out of Fitzgibbon Street Station nearby, they had to think outside the box. They started considering possibilities that seemed, well, almost unbelievable for Dublin at the time.
Like what?
Like a ritual killing. They seriously explored that angle. They spoke to religious leaders, priests from Nigeria, trying to understand if there was any cultural context. They even consulted specialist units in South Africa who dealt with ritualistic killings, mutis killings.
Wow. So they were genuinely considering that someone, like a witch doctor, might have taken these specific parts for, potions or something.
That was the fear. That the killer might have taken the parts and fled the country, leaving them with an unidentifiable victim. They were really worried they'd never know who this person was.
And that identification problem was compounded by the state of the remains, wasn't it?
Yeah.
What did the pathologist find?
Dr. Michael Curtis, the state pathologist, conducted the postmortem. He confirmed the cause of death was catastrophic internal trauma, multiple stab wounds, at least 22.
22.
Yeah. Likely from a knife, maybe a Stanley blade. The victim's heart, lungs, liver, kidneys, all severely damaged. Shredded, really.
And the dismemberment itself,
Yeah.
was it clean, surgical?
Absolutely not. Dr. Curtis was very clear on this. It wasn't surgical at all. The joints were sawed through, probably with something blunt. It suggested the process took a long, long time.
Ah,
He described the scene where it must have happened, based on the state of the body, as likely resembling an abattoir, just carnage.
but back to the identification problem. That was the immediate roadblock.
The biggest one. The parts had been in the water for maybe 7 to 14 days. Decomposition was obviously an issue.
And the water itself affected things.
Hugely. The chemical reactions in the canal water had actually bleached the skin. So initially, the remains looked almost Caucasian, pale.
Which must have been confusing.
Very. But Dr. Curtis, through his analysis, eventually confirmed the deceased was of Black origin. But even knowing that, conventional methods failed. Fingerprints. Compromised by the water.
What about missing persons reports?
They checked everything. Trawled through 62 missing persons records across Ireland. Nothing matched. They were stuck. An unidentified Black male, no prints, no head, and 0 leads. A complete dead end.
This is where the investigation really had to get creative, didn't it? They turned to something quite new at the time.
They did. Forensic science stepped up. Faced with absolutely nothing else, they explored stable isotopic analysis. Relatively new territory for Irish forensics back then.
Isotopes. Explain that a bit. How does that work?
It's fascinating, actually. They brought in Professor Wolfgang Meyer, an expert in this field. The basic idea is, well, you are what you eat and drink.
Yeah.
The water you consume has a unique isotopic signature based on where you are geographically. Think of it like a chemical fingerprint for the water source. And over time, that signature gets integrated into your body tissues, especially your bones.
So your bones record where you've been living, like a chemical GPS.
Exactly. A chemical GPS tracker embedded in your skeleton. But to use it, the Gardaí needed a baseline.
What do they have to do?
Meticulous work. They collected water samples from every single Garda station in Dublin, every single one, to map out the specific isotopic signature of Dublin water.
That's incredible groundwork. Did it pay off?
Massively. The first set of results from the victims' remains gave them 2 crucial pieces of information.
What were they?
First, origin. The isotope strongly suggested the victim came from the African continent. Probably the Horn of Africa, places like Somalia, Kenya, Sudan.
Okay, that narrows it down geographically in one sense. But what about locally?
That was the game changer. The analysis also showed that the victim had been living specifically in the Ballybough area of Dublin.
The same area where the body was found.
Exactly, and not just briefly. The signature indicated he'd been resident there for the preceding 6 months, maybe longer, over 200 days.
Wow. So as a professor apparently put it, they didn't find the needle, but they shrank the haystack.
Precisely. Suddenly, the search area wasn't the whole country or even all of Dublin. It was this one specific, manageable neighborhood right around where the parts were dumped. A massive breakthrough.
While the scientists were doing this incredible high-tech work on the bones, there was another clue, wasn't there? Something much simpler.
Yes, a very physical, low-tech clue. Remember the torso they pulled from the canal?
Yeah.
It had been wrapped in something. A distinctive white, long-sleeved Ireland away football jersey.
An Irish soccer jersey.
Yeah. Not unique, obviously. Lots of people would have one, but highly identifiable. And apart from the sock found on the leg, it was the only clothing item recovered.
So they had the location Ballybough and they had this jersey. How did they use that?
They knew they likely needed to reach specific ethnic communities now, given the isotope results and the victim's origin. So they launched a big media and community outreach strategy.
What does that involve?
They used Crime Stoppers, put a reward. They made brochures, crucially, in multiple languages featuring photos of the socks and that very specific football jersey.
Targeting who?
Ethnic newspapers, community centers, places where recent immigrants might gather. They needed to build trust, encourage someone to come forward, perhaps someone who was hesitant to talk to the police.
Did it work?
It took time. But 6 weeks later, on May 16th, 2005, it paid off. A man named Muhammad Ali Abubakar saw the appeal.
And he recognized the jersey.
He recognized the jersey. He contacted the Gardaí. He was worried about a friend, someone he hadn't seen since around March 20th.
And he gave them a name.
He did. He named the potential victim as Farah Swaleh Noor, a Somalian national. And he mentioned something else crucial. Noor was last seen on O'Connell Street with 3 women.
Okay, so now the police have a name. Farah Swaleh Noor. What's the next step?
Confirmation. They tracked down one of Farah's former partners, a woman who was the mother of his 5-year-old son. They got a DNA sample from the child.
And the result?
A match, 99.6% certainty. The mystery man from the Royal Canal finally had an identity. Farah Swaleh Noor.
But getting the name wasn't the end of the mystery, was it? It actually opened up a whole new layer of complexity.
It really did, because Farah Swaleh Noor, well, that wasn't his real identity.
He wasn't who he claimed to be.
No. His actual name was Shilila Said Salim, and he wasn't Somalian. He was a Kenyan national.
Okay, let's unpack that. Why the fake identity?
He came to Ireland in 1996. His story to authorities was that he was a Somalian refugee, a widower, a fisherman fleeing the civil war there.
But that was all a lie.
Completely fabricated. He was Kenyan. It seems he lied about being Somalian to exploit, well, potentially more favorable immigration agreements or processes for Somalis at that time. He successfully got refugee status.
Then he eventually got citizenship.
Yes, in 1999, because by then he'd fathered a child with an Irish woman, which facilitated his path to citizenship. And the part about being a widower, also a lie. He had a wife and 2 children still living back in Kenya.
So a completely manufactured identity. What else did the police find out about the real Farah Noor or Shilila Salim?
The official records, once they started digging under the real name and the alias, painted a very, very disturbing picture. It was totally at odds with the image of a vulnerable refugee.
How so?
Between 96 and his death in 2005, he built up an extensive record with the Gardaí. People who knew him described this Jekyll and Hyde personality.
Meaning?
Apparently, when sober, he could be sociable, even charming. But when he was drinking or using drugs, which seems to have been frequent, he became aggressive, volatile, threatening.
Especially towards women.
And this wasn't just anecdotal, there were official records.
Oh, yes. A significant criminal record. Convictions for public intoxication, threatening behavior, numerous assaults.
Assaults on women. Yes, and even sexual assault. There was one instance involving a knife during a sexual assault charge. He subjected multiple women to physical and sexual violence. Several former partners had taken out barring orders against him.
Barring orders. So the system knew he was a threat.
The system absolutely knew. And this is a really crucial and frankly uncomfortable point we have to pause on.
The systemic failure.
Exactly. The records clearly show this pattern of escalating violence. Multiple police reports, formal charges, barring orders specifically designed to protect women from him. And yet,
He never served any serious time.
never served any significant prison sentence. The system just failed to intervene effectively, failed to stop the cycle of abuse. And you can argue, tragically, that this failure created the volatile powder keg that eventually exploded.
It's a deeply troubling aspect of the case. And it sets the scene for his final relationship, doesn't it, with Kathleen Mulhall?
Yes, that relationship started around 2002, and from everything we know, it was toxic from the get-go.
More violence.
Documented violence. Hospital records show Kathleen suffered serious injuries at his hands, a broken wrist, cracked ribs, classic signs of severe domestic abuse. But like many victims, she felt trapped, and the relationship continued.
Did this cause problems with her family?
Huge problems. Kathleen actually moved Noor into the family home she previously shared with her estranged husband, John Mulhall, in Tallaght. John was effectively forced out.
So tension right from the start.
Immense tension. Eventually, Kathleen and Noor moved out on their own into a small flat. Flat 1, 7 Richmond Cottages, Ballybough.
Richmond Cottages, Ballybough. The exact area pinpointed by the isotope analysis.
The very same place. The place where the science said Farah Swaleh Noor had spent his last 6 months.
Okay. So to understand what happened in that flat, we need to understand the family living there, the Mulhalls.
Yes, and their background is incredibly important context. The Mulhalls were members of the Irish traveler community.
And that's significant because
And this is vital for you, the listener, to understand, the traveler community in Ireland is an indigenous nomadic group that has faced, and continues to face, really severe systemic marginalization.
what does that look like in practical terms?
Intense prejudice, historically and ongoing. It leads to high levels of poverty, social exclusion, huge gaps in things like health care and education. For instance, educationally, only about 13% of travelers complete secondary school. Housing insecurity is also a major issue. All these factors often contribute to very difficult, sometimes chaotic, home environments.
And the Mulhall family environment reflected some of those challenges.
It seems so. Reports describe it as chaotic, certainly marked by violence. Substance abuse was a major factor for the parents, Kathleen and her estranged husband, John, particularly John's alcoholism.
And the children grew up in this.
Yes. The 2 daughters we need to focus on, Linda and Charlotte, were immersed in this from a young age. It's a cycle of multi-generational trauma.
Tell us about the daughters. Linda first.
Linda was the eldest. She was 30 at the time of the murder in 2005. She'd left school very early. She was a mother herself to 4 children.
And her own struggles.
Deep struggles, sadly mirroring some of the family patterns. Severe substance abuse, alcohol, but also heroin. Reports indicate she often resorted to sex work, likely to fund her addiction and support herself. But despite all this, she was described as fiercely protective of her mother, Kathleen. Very devoted.
And the younger sister, Charlotte.
Charlotte was 21 at the time. Her path was depressingly similar to Linda's. Substance abuse issues, limited education, involvement in sex work. She also had a young child, a son.
How is she described?
Maybe a bit more robust, perhaps stronger-willed than Linda in some ways. But the sisters were incredibly close, inseparable, really. Their bond forged by that shared traumatic upbringing, that cycle of violence they'd witnessed and experienced, and absolute loyalty to each other and to their mother.
So once the Gardaí identified Noor, this family unit, Kathleen, Linda, Charlotte, and even the estranged father, John, became the absolute focus.
Squarely in their sights. In August 2005, several months after the body was found, all 4 were arrested and brought in for questioning. Interviewed separately.
What was their story?
Initially, a united front. All the women, Kathleen, Linda, Charlotte, they stuck to the same story, almost perfectly rehearsed, it seemed.
Which was?
That Farah had simply left Kathleen around St. Patrick's weekend, March 20th. They hadn't seen him since. They had no idea where he was or what had happened to him.
Even though they were the last people seen with him.
Exactly. They acknowledged that, yes, they were with him, but insisted he just vanished after that. They completely denied any knowledge of his death.
Did the investigators believe them?
Not for a second. They were convinced his family was involved. They had the location, the flat identified by isotopes. They had the suspects, the women last seen with him. They likely had phone records showing contact. But
not enough hard evidence.
Not quite enough for the Director of Public Prosecutions, the DPP. The evidence connecting them directly to the killing was circumstantial at that stage. So, the DPP decided there wasn't sufficient basis to press charges.
They were released.
Released without charge. For the Gardaí, who had worked so hard on the case, painstakingly piecing together the identity and location, this was described as an absolute body blow, a massive setback.
But that wasn't the end of it, was it? The pressure must have been immense.
Immense. The stress of the arrests, the constant suspicion, trying to maintain that cover story, it started to take its toll on the already fragile family unit.
Who did the Gardaí think would crack first?
They'd identified Linda and her father, John, as probably the most psychologically vulnerable. Linda, in particular, started showing clear signs of severe distress, depression, anxiety. There was even an attempted act of self-harm mentioned. The guilt was eating away at her.
And eventually she couldn't hold it in anymore.
Exactly. The breaking point came in October 2005, a couple of months after those initial arrests. Linda Mulhall couldn't take the pressure.
What did she do?
She reached out. Directly. She contacted Detective Inspector Christy Mangan, one of the lead investigators, and asked him to meet her privately.
Where?
At her home in Talat. And significantly, her father, John, helped facilitate this meeting. He was there.
And what happened at that meeting?
Over the next 4 to 5 hours, Linda just broke down. She gave a voluntary statement, a confession, and it was apparently utterly surreal, incredibly graphic, and deeply emotional.
She told them everything.
Everything. Horrifyingly detailed. She described her own role, her sister Charlotte's role, and their mother Kathleen's part in Farah Noor's death, and crucially, in the grotesque events that followed.
What must that have been like for the detectives listening?
The detective described it as incredibly difficult,
Yeah.
hearing these horrific details pouring out, trying to remain non-judgmental, just focusing on capturing every single piece of information accurately. They were probably worried she might stop, clam up, so they just had to listen and record.
So let's go back to that day. March 20th, 2005. According to Linda's confession, how did it all unfold?
It started early. Linda and Charlotte began drinking vodka around 11 a.m. in Talat. Later, they met up with their mother, Kathleen, and Farah Noor in Dublin city center.
And the drinking continued.
Heavily. The 4 of them apparently sat on the boardwalk by the Liffey for hours, drinking large amounts of vodka.
Just vodka?
No. Linda revealed that she, Charlotte, and Kathleen were also taking ecstasy tablets throughout the day. Farah wasn't, just the women.
So a cocktail of alcohol and drugs. Yeah. That sounds volatile.
Extremely. And as Farah got drunker, he became increasingly abusive, volatile, just like his pattern suggested. There was an incident on the way back to the flat in Richmond Cottages.
What happened?
He apparently saw a child, harassed the child, wrongly believing it was his son. It led to a violent confrontation, a fight. The tension was already sky high by the time they got back to that tiny flat.
What happened inside the flat?
Kathleen was clearly desperate to calm Farah down. According to Linda, Kathleen crushed up an ecstasy pill and secretly put it into Farah's drink, hoping it would mellow him out.
Did it work?
It seems not, or not in the way she intended. Then came the moment Linda described as the trigger, the absolute catalyst.
What was it?
Linda said she was lying on the couch. Farah came over, made aggressive sexual advances towards her. He apparently whispered something chilling in her ear, "We two are creatures of the night," while physically grabbing her neck and shoulder.
And Linda reacted.
She screamed, pure fear.
And Kathleen, what did she do?
Kathleen witnessed this. Having endured years of his abuse herself, seeing his rage now directed at her daughter, she panicked. Linda said her mother screamed out an order.
What order? Kill him. Please kill him.
Just like that.
Just like that, an outburst of terror and perhaps desperation.
And what happened then? Did the sisters obey?
The reaction was instantaneous, utter frenzy. Charlotte, the younger sister, reacted first. She ran to the kitchen, grabbed a Stanley knife, a box cutter.
Used it.
Immediately, she slashed Farah across the throat, a deep 4-inch gash.
He staggered backwards, clutching his neck, moving towards the bedroom. But Charlotte didn't stop. She followed him, stabbing him again and again.
What about Linda?
While Charlotte was stabbing him, Linda also ran to the kitchen. She grabbed a hammer. She started hitting Farah around the head with the hammer, a frenzied dual attack.
How many times was he stabbed?
The postmortem confirmed at least 27 stab wounds. He died almost immediately from those injuries, specifically the deep wounds Charlotte inflicted.
So he's dead, in this tiny flat. What happens next? The panic must have been overwhelming.
Absolutely overwhelming. They're faced with a dead body, the result of their own violent actions in this confined space. Panic set in, coupled with a desperate need to get rid of the body and, crucially, hide his identity.
And that's when they made the decision.
To dismember the corpse. A horrifying decision, born out of pure panic and pragmatism in a twisted way.
How did they even do it?
According to Linda's confession, they dragged his body into the tiny ensuite toilet, the shower cubicle.
And the tools, did they have saws or anything?
No. That's what makes it even more gruesome. They used basic kitchen knives. And the hammer. That's it.
Kitchen knives and a hammer to cut through bone.
Yes. Linda described hours of work, taking turns, hacking, sawing through joints through bone, not surgically, just brutally forcing their way through.
Linda described the scene during her confession.
She did. She spoke about the sickening smell, the absolute horror of it. She apparently kept reaching for her stomach as she recounted it. The memory was so visceral, so traumatic, even years later.
And they specifically removed the head and the penis.
Yes. That was a conscious decision, Linda confirmed, to make identification impossible, or at least much harder.
When did this happen? All through the night?
It seems it took hours, going into the early morning of March 21st. Once the dismemberment was done, they wrapped the parts in black bin liners, then stuffed those into several sports bags.
And the disposal? How did they get rid of the bags?
They were exhausted, still likely intoxicated, terrified. They just walked the bags out of the flat. The Royal Canal was right there, adjacent to Richmond cottages.
They just walked down and threw them in?
Yes. Linda said they made 4 or 5 separate trips, carrying the limbs, the torso, one bag at a time, and dumping them into the murky water just steps away.
And then they went back to the flat?
Yes. To undertake what investigators later called an incredibly thorough forensic cleanup. Removing blood-soaked sections of carpet, peeling off wallpaper that might have had splatters, trying to erase all evidence.
Linda's confession also shed light on her father's role, didn't it? John Mulhall.
It did. Phone records had already shown contact between the women and John late that night, between about 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. Linda explained what happened.
He came to the flat.
He came to the flat, he saw the bags, saw the immediate aftermath, and according to Linda, he was utterly horrified. He actually vomited outside.
Did he help them then?
Initially, no. Linda said he refused to be involved and just left. He was appalled. But he came back.
Why?
Near 6 a.m., Linda suggested it was out of pity for his daughters, seeing the terrible situation they were in. He relented.
What did he do? What was his specific role?
His role, as Linda described it, was purely about disposal of evidence after the fact. He took the bags containing the most obviously incriminating stuff, the blood-soaked bedding, the carpet they'd ripped up.
And what did he do with them?
He drove them out of Dublin. Linda said he dumped them in the River Liffey, maybe near Chapelizod, or possibly a place called Lockslip in County Kildare, far away from the flat.
So he helped with the cleanup, but not the killing or dismemberment.
That's what Linda insisted. She consistently protected her father on that point, never implicating him in the violence itself, only in the disposal afterwards.
Of all the horrifying details, the story of what happened to Farah's head is possibly the most bizarre and chilling.
It is truly grotesque and surreal. Linda confessed she was the one who dealt with the head. She put it into a backpack.
Carried it in a backpack.
Yes. And then, in this moment of almost unbelievable detachment, she and Charlotte stopped somewhere on the way to dispose of it, to buy a breakfast roll. There was even CCTV footage of them ordering food.
While carrying a human head in a bag. Linda then got on a public bus, traveled for over an hour out to Tallet with the backpack. What was she planning to do with it?
Her initial idea was to bury it. She took it to Father Sean Walsh Park in Tallet and buried the head near a park bench. Her thinking was, if the head is hidden, he can't be identified.
It is stay buried.
No. There was heavy rain soon after. Linda panicked, thinking the rain might wash away the soil and expose it, so she went back.
She dug it up again.
Put it in a different bag, a school bag this time. She then apparently drank an entire bottle of vodka for courage, went to a more secluded field or ditch nearby, and took the hammer to it. She smashed the skull into small fragments, then poured the rest of the vodka over the pieces, maybe trying to burn them, destroy them completely.
Did the Gardaí ever find the fragments?
They searched that area intensively for 2 weeks based on her confession. But no, they never found any physical trace of the head or skull particles. However, the investigators noted Linda was very, very emphatic that this is what she did. She was certain about it.
Linda's confession was the key then.
Yeah.
But the police needed to corroborate it, right?
Yeah.
To make sure it wasn't just a coerced story or false memory.
Absolutely. And they could. First, the DNA. They already had the positive match between the remains found in the canal and Farah Noor's young son, 99.6% certainty. That anchored the identity.
And the crime scene, the flat.
They went back to Flat 1, 7 Richmond cottages, armed with Linda's detailed account of the murder, the dismemberment in the bathroom, and the cleanup.
She said they did a thorough cleanup.
One of the best the investigators had ever seen, they commented. But they had a new tool, relatively new for this kind of application in Ireland back then. Luminol.
Explain luminol. How does it work?
It's a chemical spray. You darken a room completely, spray luminol, and if there are even minute traces of blood, even after cleaning, it reacts and glows, usually a faint blue color.
Did it work in the flat?
Spectacularly. Despite the meticulous cleaning, the luminol revealed large blood spatter patterns on a section of wall. And crucially, it showed where blood had soaked right through the floor coverings, deep into the wooden floorboards underneath where a bed had been.
And this blood matched Farah Noor.
All the samples taken from the luminol reactions conclusively matched Farah Noor's DNA. It proved the murder happened right there, exactly as Linda described.
What about the weapons? The knife, the hammer?
Linda told them where she dumped them. In the pond in that same park in Tallet, Father Sean Walsh Memorial Park, Garda divers searched the pond.
And found them.
Found knives, stilettos, and the hammer, precisely where she said they would be. Her confession was corroborated point by the physical and scientific evidence.
So with the confession backed up by forensics, arrests followed.
Yes. Linda, Charlotte, and their mother Kathleen were arrested again, and this time, formally charged.
What about the father, John Mulhall?
Tragically, before the trial could even start, John Mulhall took his own life. He was found deceased in Phoenix Park in December 2005.
He couldn't cope with it all.
It seems the weight of events, his limited involvement, his daughter's situation, the family's complete implosion, it was just too much for him. A truly sad postscript to the whole affair.
The trial itself must have been huge news.
It started in October 2006, Dublin Central Criminal Court. Massive media attention, national and international. The sheer brutality, the fact it was women, sisters who carried it out, it was sensational.
And that's when the nickname emerged.
Exactly. The media latched on to the Scissor Sisters, borrowed from the American pop band of the same name, obviously. It was catchy, sensational, and it stuck, completely overshadowing the grim reality and complex background.
What was the defense strategy at the trial?
They pleaded not guilty to the charge of murder. Their defense centered on self-defense and provocation,
Arguing what?
arguing that Farah Noor's attempted sexual assault on Linda, combined with his documented long-term history of violence against both sisters and their mother, amounted to cumulative trauma and extreme provocation, justifying their reaction in the moment.
How did the judge view the crime?
Justice Paul Carney presided. His remarks during sentencing were incredibly stark. He reiterated his view, saying it was simply the most grotesque killing he had ever encountered in his career on the bench.
And the jury's verdicts? They weren't straightforward, were they?
No, they reflected the complexities. The jury had to weigh the provocation against the extreme violence and the calculated actions afterwards. They delivered different verdicts for each sister.
Charlotte first. What was her verdict?
Charlotte Mulhall was found guilty of murder. She received the mandatory life sentence in Ireland.
Why murder for Charlotte?
The reasoning is thought to be that the jury decided the initial fatal stab wounds she inflicted and her continued frenzied attack went beyond what could be considered self-defense, even given the provocation. Plus, her role in the subsequent dismemberment likely factored in.
And Linda, the one who confessed.
Linda Mulhall was found guilty of the lesser charge of manslaughter.
Manslaughter. So the jury accepted the provocation argument for her.
It seems they did accept the element of provocation, likely Farah's actions towards her immediately before the attack, but her sentence was still severe.
How long?
15 years, which was the absolute maximum sentence possible for manslaughter at the time. The judge clearly wanted to reflect the horrific nature of her actions after the death, the dismemberment, the disposal, even while acknowledging the provocation element in the killing itself. Linda had also shown considerable remorse and cooperated fully.
What about the mother, Kathleen?
Kathleen had actually fled Ireland after the initial arrests. She was tracked down to London in 2008. She agreed to return voluntarily.
And her charge?
She pleaded guilty to a charge of impeding the investigation, essentially, helping conceal evidence and assisting the offenders after the fact. She received a 5-year sentence.
How much time did they actually serve?
Kathleen served 3 years of her 5-year sentence and was released in 2011. Linda was described as a model prisoner. She served 12 years of her 15-year sentence and was released relatively quietly in 2018. She's kept a very low profile since.
Not Charlotte, with the life sentence for murder.
Charlotte is still serving her life sentence. Her time inside hasn't been quite as smooth as Linda's. There have been disciplinary issues reported, including a quite shocking leaked photo back in 2008 showing her holding a knife, apparently playfully, to a male inmate's throat.
Still in prison now.
Still technically serving life, yes. Though it's reported that since around 2021, she has been granted periods of supervised temporary release, day release, as part of a gradual process towards potential eventual release, but that's still likely some way off.
Looking back at this whole horrific case, 20 years on, what are the main takeaways? It's more than just a gruesome murder story.
Oh, much more. It's profoundly complex, primarily because as you dig into it, you realize the perpetrators, Linda and Charlotte, were undeniably also victims themselves, victims of a multi-generational cycle.
Cycle of what?
Trauma, poverty, substance abuse, and particularly domestic violence. It all cascades down.
And that connects back to the systemic failure regarding Farah Noor himself.
Absolutely. We have to come back to that uncomfortable truth. His extensive documented history of violence, sexual offenses, the multiple reports, the barring orders. The system knew he was dangerous.
But failed to act effectively.
Failed to intervene in any meaningful way that might have stopped his behavior, or at least protected his victims better. That failure arguably loaded the gun for the final, fatal confrontation.
The media focus on the Scissor Sisters perhaps obscured some of that important social context, too.
Definitely. The sensationalism, while understandable given the crime's nature, often drowned out the background noise, the Mulhall struggles, the poverty, the addiction, all amplified by the systemic marginalization faced by the traveler community they belong to. It highlights broader societal issues around protecting vulnerable populations.
And the case still resonates, doesn't it? People still debate it.
They do. It remains one of Ireland's most infamous true crimes, precisely because of that raw brutality, combined with difficult ethical questions it forces us to confront.
Questions about justice.
Yeah. Was Linda's manslaughter conviction and sentence fair, given her confession and the provocation? Was Charlotte's life sentence too harsh, not taking enough account of the context of abuse? Or was it justified by the sheer violence of her actions? There are no easy answers.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, this look back at a crime that still horrifies, what should we leave our listeners thinking about?
Well, I think it comes back to that intersection of victimhood and perpetration and the system's role.
So the final provocative thought is this. Consider Farah Swaleh Noor, a man with a long history of violence against women, violence known to the authorities, yet never effectively stopped. If the system had intervened earlier, if it had protected his previous victims as it should have.
Would Kathleen, Linda, and Charlotte Mulhall have ever found themselves in that pressure cooker situation on March 20th, 2005? Would this most grotesque killing, as the judge called it, have even happened?
It forces you to ask, doesn't it? Where does society's responsibility really lie when deep-seated trauma and escalating violence finally fatally collide?